Very pleased to have my friend Andrew Boucher joining us this evening to talk a lot about what when I heard about the Colorado blueprint several years ago, I was fascinated by the concept. I bought the book, I read the book, and then I just so happened to meet Andrew through a mutual friend about a year ago, and when I found out that he was actually in Colorado during some of this, it sparked a great discussion, and I was very pleased that he agreed to join us tonight. Very quickly, Andrew Boucher is the president of Boucher Strategies, a strategic and political consulting firm based in Charleston, South Carolina. He serves as executive director of the Monday meeting, the national meeting of the Center-Right Coalition held monthly in New York City. In 2012, Boucher served as the national political director for Rick Santorum's campaign for president. He is a former executive director of the New Hampshire Republican State Committee and has consulted on and managed campaigns for local, state, and federal office in Colorado, South Carolina, New Hampshire, Missouri, Ohio, New York, and Massachusetts. And I hope you deduct all that mileage, man. That's a lot of driving. Andrew Boucher, thank you very much.
Can everyone see me and hear me? That works? Okay. Has anyone flown into Denver International Airport? Right? You fly into DIA, and then you take the tram in, and then you come up the escalators, and you get greeted by a few things. One of the things, you get some folks in cowboy hats that are there to tell you, you know, if you need help finding anything. The other thing you get greeted by is usually there's a couple of younger folks there, and they're wearing T-shirts. The T-shirts say something like Environment Colorado, and they're carrying clipboards. And they'll say, hey, you know, would you like to take a quick survey about the environment, or how we can stop strip mining, or how we can fight fracking, or nuclear waste, whatever. They always have a pitch. And these folks come up and they get folks to fill out the survey. At the end of the survey, they'll actually ask you for 20 bucks if you want to contribute to their work. And you walk away, and that's it. You don't have to give them 20 bucks. You filled out their survey. You've just been ID'd. You're now part of a $10 million annual, not per election cycle, annual operation that focuses primarily on down-ballot races. I mean, it plays in the U.S. Senate races and the gubernatorial races, but their biggest focus over the past decade has been these down-ballot races. I want you to think about that. They are that minute that they have people at the airport and on the 16th Street Mall in Denver and at high-traffic walking areas in cities around the state that they're getting ID data one-on-one using volunteers. I can speak to that because they're not really volunteers. And that ID data is going into a master database where they are taking that and they're putting that on direct mail. They're using that to target their direct mail 18 months later. It's $10 million annually, not per election cycle. What does that look like? If you read the blueprint, or I think Fred Barnes wrote an article called The Colorado Model, they have a life cycle. We send direct mail. You know, Republicans, you know, when we're looking at state representative and state senate races, we send direct mail. And we start like 6 to 8 weeks out, and we'll send a couple of direct mail pieces a week in a highly targeted race, and really try to differentiate between the Republican and the Democrat, you know, in the last 6 to 8 weeks of an election. They start 2 years out. They have an unlimited budget, and here's how it works. They take someone who they believe is going to be a targeted seat or a targeted race, or an up-and-coming Republican or a rising star, or somebody who they think might run for office in 2 or 4 years to step up to run for office. Maybe it's a state senator who they know in 4 years is going to take a shot at the congressional seat. So they're starting years in advance. The first thing that happens is what we call lawfare. There are groups called Colorado Ethics Watch, staffed by attorneys, paid for out of the same hopper of that $10 million, and they'll file an ethics complaint. Okay? So that usually just gets thrown into wherever they send ethics complaints to, the state or the Secretary of State or wherever, and nobody really pays attention because a lot of them are BS to begin with. Except one group keys off that, and that is the network of blogs and online publications. Groups like the Colorado Independent, Colorado Polls, they go and they know that these ethics complaints are coming. Imagine that. And they publicize them. The Denver Post usually still doesn't pick up on it. You know, the Fort Collins Colorado doesn't pick up on it. The Greeley Tribune doesn't pick up on it. The Colorado Springs Gazette doesn't pick up on it. Until another group steps in, also funded by the same author, Colorado Media Matters. Sometimes they're called something different. They go by different names. And they call out the Denver Post for being so conservative right-wing in their biases that they're not writing the name of this horrible Republican who's had this ethics complaint filed against them in the Denver Post. The Colorado Independent, which is a purely independent online publication, surely had it. Why is the Denver Post so conservative and biased for Republicans? And there's a punchline to that if you've ever read the Denver Post. It's your typical big city daily newspaper. And they go out and they put pressure on the Denver Post. Eventually, the name of that Republican candidate will appear in the Denver Post. Remember, they've got 2 years to do this. Eventually, that candidate's name goes into the Denver Post, and in the headline will say something along the lines of, candidate's name, ethics violation. Then what? Activist groups will show up and picket that candidate's headquarters, business. And wouldn't you know it, that 6 to 8 weeks before an election, that ethics violation on a candidate who's already been bloodied by the media will start appearing on direct mail pieces. And remember, it's a $10 million annual budget, and that's just what we could find. $10 million annual budget is sending mail pieces, literally a mail piece a day, for the last 6 to 8 weeks. I had a client in 2000, I guess it was 2008, he was running for state representative. We figured the only way, we have a highly targeted seat, we figured the only way we could get under the radar screen was to speak up on the guy. And one day we started getting direct mail in our mailboxes. And I said to him, God, you got a good race. So it's 7 weeks out. I said, you had a good race because I know based on their tactics at this point that you're within 5 to 10 points of the incumbent. He said, we were running a $200,000 race for state representative. That's not nothing. They hit him with a direct mail piece a day from that day on, because their polling had shown that he was within 5 to 10 points, and he boom, boom, and just hammered him from that day forward. So you know, we're doing things like sending direct mail in the last weeks of the campaign. They're running a 2-year strategy where we're looking at voter files and likely voters. They're taking ID data from people as they get off airplanes. What's your address? You know, where are you registered to vote? Would you like to be more involved? My wife's Republican, I'm a Republican. We lived in a Republican household in a fairly swing district, in a fairly swing city. They came to our door, right? They came to our door. We're not exactly low profile. We're not exactly independent voters. They came to our door to ask specific questions about specific issues, because at that point they were still using ID tactics to try to peel us off the Republican majority, even though it was a Republican household. And if we had given them an issue, maybe we'd said, you know, we're really anti-fracking. I guarantee you we would have gotten mail in that next election specifically talking and only talking about fracking. That's the level of sophistication that we're dealing with in Colorado. 2004 is when it really started. And just a little context, in 2004, Colorado Republicans held the governor's office, both United States Senate seats, 5 of the 7 congressional seats, the state house, and the state senate. 4 years later, the Democrats held the governor's office, both United States Senate seats, 5 of the 7 congressional seats, the state house, and the state senate. It was a complete switch. It took them 4 years. So how'd they do it? Well, we never saw it coming. I was working in the House Majority Leader's PAC's office, whatever it was, in 2004, and they had they rewrote the campaign finance laws. And what they did is they shrunk the size of the contribution that was allowed. I think it was $200 per person per election. And that was the first thing they did. And then they set up these small donor committees, and all these sort of loopholes. The small donor committees were designed to get labor unions more involved, of course. And we were sitting there reading the laws, trying to come up with anything we could come up with to be able to raise and spend money on these state elections. The Democrats figured out a little thing called a 527. Remember this? And they realized they could use them in state races. So we walked into the 2004 election cycle thinking we were trying to raise and spend money under state laws. They simply raised and spend money under federal laws. The state senate race that I was watching, and it's in the book, The Blueprint, quite a bit. Is the mayor of Fort Collins, Colorado, a city of about 130,000 people. It essentially comprises the state senate district, right? There's not a lot of overlap. His name was Ray Martinez. They recruited a guy to run against him who was a nice, friendly old man. Ray Martinez had a 68% approval rating in August. I know, I saw the polling. Ray Martinez in November got 42% of the vote. Between that polling and that election day, the Democrats spent $1.7 million on a state senate race. They were running, you're an hour outside of Denver TV. Denver TV cost $400,000 for a week in 2004. The Democrats were buying Denver TV for Ray Martinez's opponent. They had an entire online operation with a website called raylikes2travel.com. They were sending direct mail once a day. They had radio ads. There was not anything you could think of in a campaign. It was the gold plate. I wish I had $1.7 million to use for a congressional campaign. They were using it in a seat that was only representing 130,000 people. And they were going up against a popular incumbent Hispanic mayor who had been elected with 70-some-odd% of the vote just 1 year earlier, 2 years earlier. And there's a former police officer, volunteered his time with the fraternities in town to help, the youth. Beloved. And the day after the election, he was beloved again. Everyone loves Ray Martinez to this day. But on that election day, they had convinced the voters to vote for Bob Bacon, his opponent. So what is the Colorado model? What are the key defining characteristics, and what sets it apart from what's going on in North Carolina? And I think what you guys can take from this, which is important. They attempted to replicate the Colorado model, this cycle that utilizes different groups all working together. And I think that's an important component, right? So it is not just, we're going to start a group and fire away at these candidates. No. What they have done is the unions, the environmental groups, the think tanks, some of the academic community, the 501c3s, groups like the League of Women Voters, legal groups, ethics groups, they are all on board with this. They don't have primaries. They say, this is our candidate. And everyone says yes. And they don't have big discussions about strategy and tactics. They say, this is what we're going to do. And everyone says yes. And they don't have people saying, well, don't send that direct mail, it's too negative. Or don't bring up that issue, it's too divisive. They just say, this is what we're going to do. And everyone says, yes. Why? And what makes Colorado very unique? And this might be the saving grace, because North Carolina is probably the most targeted state for this action in the next cycle. Colorado has 4 individuals who fund the entire program. Remember when I said it was a $10 million annual budget? You have 4 who funded it. One is Pat Stryker, worth $1.7 billion. She's the heiress to the Stryker medical supply fortune. I don't like when I go to the hospital and I have to lie on a Stryker bed. It bothers me. Rut Bridges, maybe Remax, Tim Gill, who did some sort of software stuff, and Jared Polis, who's now in Congress. These 4 people funded the entire thing. So they don't have to sit down with a donor and say, we'd really like you to give $50,000. We'd really like you to give $25,000. That's a big donor, right? They don't have to do that. They just say, okay, where do we write the checks? And what they did that was smart is they got these donors into a room with someone they all respected, who was the former president of the Colorado State University. And they basically said, this is the guy, we trust him. And what they did is they went out to all these different groups and they funded those groups. You have a think tank? We're going to give you money for half your operating budget. Right? Well, when you come to the table in a year from now, we're talking about candidates, and you're a legal group, or a think tank, or a labor union, or an environmental group, and a major portion of your budget is coming from us either way, and we say, this is our candidate, you say, no, it's kind of like, no, this is the candidate. Guess what? This is your candidate. 4 people funding the entire operation. It's a lot easier to get consensus than if you have to have $450,000 donors to come up with that same $10 million, and I hope my math is right. And in fact, when the Republicans tried to go head-to-head with the Democrats in 2006 and 2008, they did something smart, which I would recommend very highly. We were going to $50,000 donors and $100,000 donors, and they went after our donors. And they put the donors' names in the papers. Well, when you have 4 people who don't care, you know, they're pretty bulletproof. When you have 50 and $100,000 donors, usually they're in a demographic that is a little bit more sensitive to seeing their name in the paper. And they effectively went out and dried up a lot of Republican money in Colorado because they made it painful for people to stick their heads above ground and say, look, I'm going to support the Republican side of things instead of the Democrat side of things. That's sort of the life cycle of 2004. It's still going on. I did a post-mortem in Colorado to a business group as to explain why Ken Buck lost the Senate seat in Colorado. And I actually used North Carolina as an example as well of states that didn't do as well in 2010 as they should have, right? You saw 2010 was a landslide. And North Carolina did all right, Colorado did all right, but they weren't part of a landslide in 2010. Well, I did a post-mortem in Colorado, and what I told them was, look, the Colorado activist community and the Colorado independent expenditure community, it has nothing to be ashamed of. You're the second best state-level independent expenditure groups I've seen in the United States. The second best. The problem is the first best is on the other side of the aisle in the exact same state, and they crush you every time. So, I'll tell you, I've got battle scars. I'm weary. I'm based in Charleston, and so when I saw what was going on, when you guys made the newspaper as the North Carolina, what's it called? The Blueprint North Carolina, it struck a nerve. Because I've been there and I've seen it up close and personal. I've had friends, you know, Ray Martinez was a friend, still is a friend. A lot of these candidates are good friends, and they never saw it coming. I'm here to tell you, this is what's coming. So, you know, I do want to open it up to questions. I do want to make one more point. I got my cheat sheet here. You'll have to excuse me. So I want to make. Oh yeah. No, this is a bad story. I'm sorry. This is why we're going to fail. I wanted to send a couple words of warning. I work for Rick Santorum. I work for multiple candidates in the fall. I'm not affiliated with anyone. I'm not with Rick anymore. I was part of the, you probably all called it the 72-hour program in 2004, 2006, 2008. I saw that up close and personal. We called it the 96-hour program in Colorado because we had it a day. We thought we were going to win. We weren't. We've got 2 serious problems that if we do not address as an activist community, we're not going to change this. And I've talked about, and I'll answer questions on the Colorado model, but I'm talking about what we in this room can do. The first thing is we're preaching to the choir way too much. Right? You know, I spoke at our first Tea Party rally in 2009 in Fort Collins, Colorado. 1,500 people there. Right? And I think every Tea Party had this life cycle where we're now preaching way too much to the choir. We forget that our next door neighbor ain't voting our way. And our next door neighbor might not have a sign in their yard. And if you go down your block, we're not talking to the folks on our block. When we're on Facebook, we've ghettoized ourselves into ideological ghettos where we're only talking to each other, because I'm telling you, most of your friends have probably flipped the switch that says hide the updates from this person because we posted one too many political things, right? Because I do that to my local friends and family. So we're talking to most of the groups, and this is almost like the life cycle of groups, is we sort of start talking to each other a little bit too much. We forget about the folks down the block. We forget about our friends and family on Facebook who need to hear a message that's packaged in a way that is resonant to them. The second thing is, as I alluded to, the 72-hour model, and this was my biggest pet peeve with how the Romney campaign ran. Folks, and this goes back to the neighborhood problem as well. We've got to get out of this habit of robocalls, anonymous phone calls. If we're at our best, we're knocking on doors, but it's never on the door of a neighbor. Look, if you volunteer to work for one of the presidential campaigns in the last 3 cycles, what happened? You're like, I'd love to volunteer for Romney for president, or McCain for president, or Bush Cheney 04. What happened? They said, great. Can you come down to a phone bank across town, handcuff yourself to one of these server phones for a day, and call strangers for 7 hours? Look, hey, it didn't work, right? We have this 72-hour program has divorced the grassroots from the neighborhoods. We're still knocking on doors, we're still making phone calls, but when you pick up the phone and it's somebody from the Romney campaign and you don't recognize the caller ID, it means you're getting called from a stranger and it is significantly less effective. We need to start figuring out a way to get back into the neighborhoods, focus on the neighborhoods, because you know what? That's what the Obama campaign did this last cycle. And I'm going to end with this, and this should scare everyone. Obama had a 50-to-1 ratio on average in targeted states between voters and activists, volunteers, 50-to-1. So they didn't have their volunteers coming in to man centralized phone banks to call strangers. They would say, we need you to go through the floor of your apartment complex. Here are the names of all the voters there, and we need them to show up. They were organizing to the barbershop level. And that's not just a euphemism. They would literally have somebody in a barbershop whose job with the Obama campaign within that organization was to get... And look, folks, I predate the 72-hour program. This is how I and many of you learned politics. Precinct captains, block captains, coalitions. You're the person who represents your campaign or your organization within your church community or your barber shop. All of this comes back, and it's all interwoven. I'd like to think I'm optimistic. I think that the Republican Party is more conservative now than it's been in my lifetime. Usually I get a on that. Imagine 10 years ago having the group of 6 or 8 or maybe 10 United States senators that we have right now with folks like Ted Cruz and Mike Lee and Jeff Flake. Right? We didn't have that 10 years ago. The Republican Study Committee in the U.S. House is growing, and it's more conservative every day. They're not perfect, but we didn't have that, when Denny Hastert was Speaker of the House. And heck, we didn't have when Newt Gingrich was Speaker of the House. They passed a lot of crap. Sorry, I love them, but... and so there was no golden era. And frankly, within our coalition, we're kind of in a golden era of good small government conservatives, and we're rising. The problem is, how do we go out and communicate that to our neighbors? How do we do what everyone's talking about in terms of outreach? And how do you do it in a state where they're going to be spending multi-million dollars to build an infrastructure? They already have a lot of it in place because of Organizing for America to beat you down. There's no easy answer, but from where I sit, it all starts with the precinct captain, the block captain, the Facebook captain, who goes beyond their comfort zone, beyond their ideological ghetto and starts communicating with swing voters in a way that they'll listen to and in a way that's persuasive. So I want to open it up to questions. I can do a lot of specifics as well.
Well, this is more of a comment. Tim Gill is the guy, the spirit. This is all his brainchild.
Yeah.
Now he is a absolutely maniacal evangelical homosexual. I mean, his whole raison d'etre in the political realm is to legitimize homosexuality. Stryker and these other three people have helped him on his various projects. And what he's done in Colorado is fund these 527s. And the purpose of it is to get left-wing people that he controls politically into political office, so they'll have homosexual marriage and domestic, every wish list you could possibly imagine. That's what his real underlying motive is. And I'm surprised you didn't mention that, because I mean that's his big thing.
Colorado's Amendment 2, but it is a gay marriage debate. It goes back a dozen years. Supreme Court case. There's a whole bunch of stuff, and that was a motivation. And Pat Stryker has somewhat of a similar motivation, her brother. But if that was the end goal, they spent a decade being shrewd and pragmatic enough that says, folks with D's after their name vote our way, folks with R's after their name do not. And they added to their wish list a lot of progressive causes, environmental causes, labor causes, over the years in order to build a coalition to elect people with D's after their name with a very long-term goal. And that was the long-term goal, but I don't think it was, very quickly, it was not the overriding goal, because as they built their coalition, the environmental groups had their goals. They had, anti-fracking legislation, and the unions had their goals.
It sounds like you're for liberal, but the point at the end of the day is to implement their agenda. And the problem that you've got is the elitists that run the Republican Party are in bed with them on most of the issues that they believe in. And we just saw that with Laura Bush and Powell and Cheney coming out for gay marriage. So, I mean, you're talking about, I can't even vote for these people. I won't vote for these people.
Well, Colorado has, in 2008, had a Democrat governor, 2 Democrat senators, 5 of 7 Democrat
You got
congressmen.
David Ballmer. He's like the minority leader of the House.
I know David.
Yeah. A very ethical and wonderful person.
Yeah,
he's a great man.
Well, but my point is they flipped the entire state in 4 years because they said, we're going to take a long view of this. We're going to elect people with D's after their names. And in the end, we'll get what we want. But we've all got to come together and elect people with D's after their names.
You've outlined the problem. What's the solution? We have Reince Priebus up there going on all the talk shows saying, I'm going to dedicate $10 million to the next program nationwide. You're talking $10 million in Colorado.
Yeah.
What's the solution? For North Carolina.
Yeah, short of finding 4 people who can chip in $2.5 million a year.
Which they're out there.
No, I think there does need to be significant independent expenditure organizations. There are some in North Carolina. There are some in every state. They're usually disorganized. That is the nature of the beast. I think activist organizations, as I said, look, what infuriated me most post-election was you hear talk about outreach and Hispanic outreach and all this stuff, and I believe in Hispanic outreach. I don't believe in what they're going to come up with as a solution, which is to probably spend $10 million on ads on Univision. What I think the best way, I don't think that there's a precinct in America. I don't care about the ethnicity of the precinct. I don't care if that precinct's on a college campus. I don't care. I don't think that there's a precinct in America that doesn't have a conservative who's willing, if empowered, and given the tools that he needs, to stand up and say, this is what I believe in, here's why, join my fight. And our entire party, our entire get out the vote operation for the last decade has been structured to, as I said, when that person raises their hand and says, I want to join the fight, we say, great, get into your car, drive away from your precinct, drive across town, sit at a phone and call strangers for 8 hours today. That, it's outreach, if you take that leader, that conservative in a Latino precinct, and you say, here's a package. Here are all the voters who we think can be persuaded in your precinct. Here's some messaging tools. What else can we provide to you? That is how we change this. And it's neighbor to neighbor. We're getting crushed. We're getting crushed on both sides. We're getting crushed with the big dollars. We're getting crushed neighbor to neighbor. There's a dynamic out there that I'm sure you see in North Carolina. I live in Charleston, so we don't have this problem because we don't have Democrats. Although we might have, give us a few weeks, we might have liked the Democratic congresswoman. I sure as heck saw it in Colorado, where what they have done is they have made it socially unacceptable in polite company to be a Republican or a conservative, right? People don't go to cocktail parties for their Chamber of Commerce and business after hours and say, you know what, I'm a conservative Republican. What do they say? They say, well, I vote the person, not the party. Even if they are a conservative Republican, they say, I vote the person, not the party. Or I usually vote Republican, but I don't know about so-and-so. Or this guy's too conservative. We love to play that game in polite company. I can solve that problem for you. The most powerful tool in politics, and they did this to us, is, no one's going to believe me when I say this, it's almost a cliche, a yard sign on an actual yard in an actual neighborhood. In Colorado, in swing neighborhoods, there were no Republican yard signs because it was socially unacceptable to put a Republican yard sign on a yard. And I'm sure some of the folks in this room, if you live in upper middle class suburbia or in the exurbs around this city, probably feel the same way. And frankly, our campaigns have stopped trying to put yard signs on people's yards. We strew them across the road signs and in rights of way, but we've forgotten. When I talked about divorcing the activist base from the neighborhoods, the grassroots from the neighborhoods, it used to be, when I started this a few years ago, and I learned, it was you go out and recruit a county chairman and a town chairman and a precinct captain, and you give the county chairman a stack of signs and a list, and you get them to recruit the town chairman who give a stack of signs and a list, and you give the precinct captain, we need 47 votes out of your precinct, here's 30 signs, here's a list of people, let us know when you've got the 47 votes lined up and when you've got those 30 signs on people's yards. We don't do that anymore. And it's a tactical mistake over the past decade. Yeah.
Yeah, you were mentioning about not being able to get the outreach and stuff like that. But Mitt Romney got, like, I don't know how many million less votes than John McCain. If he would have just got what John McCain got, he would have beat Obama. And Mitt Romney, I mean, the reason he wasn't able to, but he still could have beat Obama, was he was such a horrible candidate. And now what Reince Priebus has done and what the rules changes have done is pretty much forced out the grassroots through rules, I don't know if everybody knows this, rules 12, 16, and rules 40, and people like Morton Blackwell, the conservative old guard, have tried to get that back. But you also have guys like Lindsey Graham and John McCain calling everybody wacko birds. Would that not be more of the... I think more of our problem comes from the establishment, not from the grassroots. The grassroots, they're here.
Yeah. Well,
Almost.
I'll say two things on that. First of all, every time Republicans disagree, it's the front page, it's on Meet the Press. Right? Democrats disagree all the time. I mean, what was the guy? Jim Jeffords switched parties, and he's on every talk show. You remember that? Senator from Vermont, Jumpin' Jim Jeffords. He switched parties about a decade ago. He is hailed as a hero in the press. Flip it over and Joe Lieberman becomes an independent, and they're complaining about Joe Lieberman, right? So we have a tendency to read our own press, and sometimes our own press exacerbates our problems. The left has the same problems. They have factions. There were entire groups dedicated to, fighting against Barack Obama from within the Hillary faction in 2008. I can't remember if anyone knows the name of that group. They were hilarious to read, but they were, you know, sort of a hell no, we won't go. Hillary got screwed. Group.
Well, they brought up the birther issue.
Yeah. Well, yeah. It's just a function of parties. It's a function of organizations. It's a function of groups. There's entire books about the political science behind factions. They tend to go behind their candidate a little better than we do. And they tend to overlook flaws in their candidate better than we do. And I think, so I mean, I think you fight it out tooth and nail in primaries. I believe that that's where it should be fought out, and on the floors of conventions. I've been involved in a lot of those fights. And then you've got to unite behind your candidate, warts and all.
But how do we fight it out on the floor of the convention whenever John Boehner's reading off of a teleprompter and the votes aren't counted? I mean,
glad you have that. Ask that. Because the entire makeup of the Republican National Committee is in flux as we speak. So whatever you call it in North Carolina, if it's reorganization or caucus, you're going to be meeting at your. This is the beauty of the political party system. You have a voice. If you show up and get elected and get elected and go elected, you can be on the Republican National Committee as well.
I'm running for state chair.
There you go.
I think an interesting thing that we may see between now and 16, as we watch the mainstream quote-unquote media continue to implode and bleed both watchers, readers, listeners, that one thing that I think we have to do on our side, we've got to quit being our worst enemy. We've got to quit having our voices repeating what's being said on MSNBC that has 37 viewers for their primetime television show. You know, I mean, I have great respect for Rush Limbaugh. Don't listen to him much anymore just because of somebody who I prefer, but one of the biggest problems I see with him and Hannity and these two people, I'm sorry, when you're getting, you know, Limbaugh's what, 32 million, I think, is the estimated uniques per week. There are more people that hear in a 2-minute segment on his show what happened on MSNBC that promotes the Democrat candidate. And I just think sometimes we shoot ourselves, you know, what's the most famous thing Republicans are great for? Forming circular firing squads. And I think that I see a difference in it that the media is losing some of its punch if we're smart enough to use our side of it.
Yeah. You know, I'm not thrilled with the bias of the media, but how do we do it 15 years ago? I mean, remember when Rush Limbaugh came on the scene in 1988, 89, he sort of lit it up, and on a national level, that was it. There was no internet, and he was it on talk radio. Somehow we got it done. So these are the cards we've been dealt, and frankly, I think we've got a better chance at cutting through the clutter, as long as we don't screw it up ourselves, which we tend to than we've ever done before.
I have questions going back to strategies, because ever since I started getting a little bit more involved in our local GOP here and paid closer attention to the local races, I noticed that we were heavily hammered with straight ticket voting. And I guess part of my concern is with President Obama's election and the kind of demographics that we have here, we have a lot of voters who are awakened to simply cast their vote to be a team player, team Democrat, straight ticket.
Yeah.
So what strategies or what should we consider to try and combat straight ticket voting?
Yeah, straight ticket. I mean, folks in Texas love straight ticket voting, right? When I was in New Hampshire, we were the most Republican state in the country. We love straight ticket voting, and the Democrats were trying to get rid of straight ticket voting. So it cuts both ways. I personally, I'm not a big fan of straight ticket voting just on straight ideological basis. So, yeah, call your legislators if that's a fight.
Yeah, just like to get your perception about the voter fraud that you see happening in Ohio and elsewhere.
I'm going to borrow this from John Fung, and I talked to John the day after the election for about an hour. And what he said is, his theory on voter fraud is the enhanced attention brought to the issue through voter ID and groups like True the Vote that were getting eyeballs on the election process at the polling place made it so that the fraud was not widespread. It was not enough to switch, change an election. Fraud is very hard to pull off. But knowing that we had eyeballs on the system tamped down a lot of potential for it. And so we need to keep up that type of pressure to make sure that it doesn't become an issue. But I didn't, I was in Ohio for at least part of the day on election day. I woke up in Ohio on election day. I didn't see it. I was in St. Louis at night on election day. There's always going to be some, but in terms of it being widespread enough to turn an election, there are a lot of things we could talk about on that. But I think in this case, retroactively, I think it's a red herring to look at the 2012 election in terms of voter fraud. I will talk.
With that, can you speak specifically to some of those places, and it may not have turned in the election, but 100% vote for one or the other candidate?
Yeah.
How does that happen?
Yeah, it doesn't.
But you say that it's not at a level that would have made a difference?
No,
I mean, that really...
I think if I were to focus on one thing, I'd focus on the dangers of early and absentee voting. I think that's a big focus area. I think that is the rife for fraud. It's a heck of a lot harder to, voting a couple times in the same day with the same ID at different polling places, that happens. But it's not rife for widespread fraud. I'll tell you, when, in Colorado, 80% of the people cast their ballots before election day. You have a 2-week early voting period, but before that, if you've checked the box that says, I would like a mail ballot, you can say, I would like a permanent mail ballot. And you are then on the permanent mail ballot list, and they mail you a ballot every 2 years for every election, no matter what. Right? I'm sure, in fact I know, that there are ballots that get mailed to people who are no longer there. They just make sure that the mail is deliverable, and then they send the ballot. So there are more important places, I think, to focus. Keep the eyeballs on the polls, stay vigilant as much as possible. But folks, this early and absentee stuff and permanent mail ballot stuff is going to be a tough fight.
Yeah, I'm very disturbed about the crossover voting during the primaries. I don't know why the Republicans don't insist you got to be a registered Republican at least 6 months before you vote in the Republican primary.
Me neither. I'm in full agreement. I couldn't agree more. This is the time for Republicans to pick their nominee and Democrats to pick their nominee. I don't understand why a Democrat, and every state is different. South Carolina actually doesn't have voter registration on the boards, right? So you can vote anywhere or with either party. Some states it's purely a closed primary. Some states independents can choose which one they vote for, but once they choose once, that's the one they have to vote for next time unless they proactively go back and say, you know what, I want to become independent again and be able to choose when I... So there are different systems. I actually like the one that says Republicans vote Republicans, Democrat vote in the Democrat primary.
That's why we get so many Republicans. The base is just turned off.
Yeah.
If they don't, we need to identify our base. We basically just said we need to take care of the base before we start.
Back here.
Yeah, I like what you were saying earlier about not wasting time. If you get a volunteer in a certain precinct by going out and doing some phone banks to strangers, but to target your own precinct and to target your own area. And you talked about strategizing, like go to the in your apartment building or something and being given information about these are people we think that you might conflict, that you can talk to, that might swing one way or the other, that you might have influence over. Well, I'm kind of curious about how do you find out who those people are that might be persuaded. Because I have an old friend from high school, for example, so he's the same age as I am. And as I've grown through my life, I've become a little bit more conservative in my present age than I was when I was younger. But my friend somehow I know he's intelligent because he used to kick my butt in chess all the time in high school, and he works for IBM, but he's a little bit insular in his thinking, and he is so steeped in deception that there's almost no topic of conversation I can have with him without him taking, the wrong side. And it's amazing to me how intelligent he can be and how in error he can be at the same time. And so I'm wondering, this guy is irredeemable, but there's got to be some people that are on the edge that can be persuaded to, good thoughts and logic and truth that might actually get switched from one side or the other. I'm wondering, how do you identify who those people are, and how do we target them?
I'll tell you, I'm one of 7, okay? So Thanksgiving is 9 people sitting around a table, or was. And, because we don't get together, we don't even try anymore.
At least you don't?
Yeah. We're a very diverse family, and that's an understatement. We go from myself, my more conservative brother, to organic farmer in Vermont, to militant socialist in San Francisco, and I am not making this up. Politics.
All in the family.
Yeah, politics on a macro level is that Thanksgiving dinner table. No one's ever won an argument around the dinner table on Thanksgiving with their leftist sister by pounding the table and getting red in the face and yelling and you ignorant, right? And I know because it's been tried at my own family dinner table. You don't win. It's talking to folks, figuring out places where you can agree, building from there. Well, that's how you do it on the micro level. How are we doing it on the macro level? We're spending $270 million on TV ads in the targeted states. I am sure that you guys got sick of the TV ads in North Carolina, correct?
DVR.
But you know what? They're spending that money, and I woke up on election day in Ohio, flip on the Today Show, every ad was a political ad. I can tell you why. It's the dirty secret of politics. But I'll tell you first why it fails. It goes back to that dinner. There's no conversation. It is, we're going to tell you in 30 seconds why you should vote for our guy and not the other guy. No one's ever won an argument like that. No one's ever won a convert like that. And that's why I'm a huge advocate of getting into the neighborhoods and talking neighbor to neighbor, voter to voter. Why are we wedded to television ads, robocalls, phone banks, which have something called a server phone, right? Where the phone automatically dials, and when you press the stuff, it right? Direct mail. And I'm not saying these things aren't effective, but I'll tell you why they happen. It's because somebody is making 15% every time $1 is spent on any of those services. Period. You run $100 million worth of TV ads in Ohio, you do the math. Some consulting group pocketed $15 million. You think those volunteer phone calls are free? No, they buy that time on those server phones by the minute. And someone in that campaign or some consultant is making 15% off every dollar spent on those minutes. Want to know why Romney was literally 7 robocalls in a day during the South Carolina primary in January? It's because somebody said, oh my goodness, he might not win this nomination. We better get paid somehow. We better load it up in the primaries. Because they needed to make their cut. You know who makes 15% when you hire a field representative to go recruit a town chair, to go find precinct captains and hand off a piece, here's your voter list, here are your 30-yard signs, here are your instructions on how to get them out? Nobody makes 15% when you hire a field representative. Guess what? These campaigns are understaffed with the field representatives who do the dirty work of recruiting captains, distributing signs, setting up teams to go door-to-doors within neighborhoods. It's a serious problem on our side of the aisle. It's a serious problem on their side of the aisle, but they've overlooked it.
Because they got more money.
They just go to service.
Yeah, and they do pay their volunteers. At least in Colorado they do. That's by the way.
So how do we put the pressure on our party to change that? I mean, how do we get cut out the pork. I mean, that's what it is, right?
How do you change the party? You've got to do it from the inside and get used to losing. Okay, no, I'm serious about this. The worst thing that can happen to an organization, to a movement, is to get infected with what I call take my ball and go homeism. You're gonna lose. You're gonna lose. And next time you might win, probably not. Next time you might win, probably not. And within the party and within the organizations, it's a matter of showing up. It's showing up at your precinct caucuses or reorganization or county convention or state convention. And it's, you know, sometimes you aren't as popular as you think you are. Right? That's why it is. But
you're not as popular as all the consultants are telling you you are either.
Right. But, you know, I don't know. I'm still optimistic. You know, I think our side has the right messages. I think we're right on the issues. I think we've got more hard-working folks who are in it for the right reasons. And so, okay, I can do one more question. Right.
I got, this is like a two-prong, but money. Sure. So you're telling us in a nutshell that rich liberals don't care what people say about them, the rich conservatives do, so they hold back. And then if that money's out there, or if they're not worried, where's the money, you know, where's this large amount that we can count on? And possibly, you know, and maybe talk to it how it goes down to paying volunteers.
Yeah. So there are two things. The first thing is, yes, we are more sensitive and they put better pressure on it. Everyone knows the name of the Koch brothers. If the Koch brothers fund something, it's instantly tarnished in the press. If George Soros funds something, or the Tides Foundation funds something, it's somehow still, okay to quote them in the mainstream press. I mean, if you go on the League of Women Voters website, it is a litany of absolute progressive issues, one after another. Please do this when you go home. Go check out their website. They're quoted in the paper as, all we want is to increase. No, the League of Women Voters, it's right there on their website. And they're not, more power to them. Okay? It's great. But we are more sensitive to that. Secondly, yes, it matters how you spend your money. I talked about those folks in the Environment Colorado t-shirts. There was a point, and I was tracking them. You could go on Craigslist, and you could scroll down the job listings, and it would say, work to stop fracking and get paid. Stop strip mining and get paid, and all this stuff. And it would be different listings, and you could scroll down one after another after another. And you press the link, and they all went to the same web page.
On the same phone number.
Yeah, with the same phone number, same web page, which actually was a group in Massachusetts, which was hiring people in Boulder to go to DIA wearing the t-shirts and work. So they were spending their money on the ground, paying activists to ID folks and to carry the message. And we were spending our money on TV ads.
85% of it.
85% of TV ads. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Well, they're a nonprofit. They're a nice 501c3 nonprofit. Right. So I think that, yes, we're more sensitive. They do a better job putting pressure on our money. But we also misspend the money. There are some great groups out there that are working very hard to fix this problem. The funding mechanisms at the very top are hopefully, they're under assault and will be changing. I have a client, a national client, that's rolling out a national grassroots organization dedicated essentially to doing house parties. And I'll send Christian an email when it becomes public. It's basically house parties in targeted precincts where we're going to get together and we're going to talk politics in a very non-threatening, we're just going to talk politics. We're going to go through an issue a month. That's how it starts. And the changes are coming at a national level. The hundreds of millions of dollars that have been tied up in the people who are basically, hey, let's run $100 million worth of TV and I'll take 15%. That's breaking up. There are concerted efforts to break up that monopoly at the highest end and make sure it goes to groups that are organizing at the grassroots level, make sure it goes to groups who are actually doing precinct level outreach and people who are thinking a different way about how we actually do politics. So there is hope. let's check back in after next November and see if it's actually working. So, but thank you all very much for having me.
Well, North Carolina locally, we don't necessarily have the benefit right now for billionaires that can fund each and everything that we try to do. What we do have, I think, is a remarkably good grassroots conservative network across the state. I think our Republican Party works a lot better than some in other states that I've participated in. I think our Tea Parties, not only here locally in Mecklenburg, but as you can see from other folks that we have in attendance tonight, we have a very good open line of communication with other groups, not only regionally, but across the state. We have an opportunity to, even if we don't have the funding, the Colorado model proves one thing. By creating an echo chamber of rhetoric, you can win an argument. And when you have multiple groups talking about the same policy over and over again, you have grassroots blogs talking about that policy and highlighting issues that are coming forth to the community over and over again. We can grow that echo chamber. And actually, even if we don't have $1 billion, we still, I think, in North Carolina have a unique opportunity to be very effective with the grassroots tools that we do have available to us. And so, again, I appreciate the speech, the information, and just looking forward to working with all the groups that we have locally so that we can continue a right-leaning message. Maybe we won't agree on every issue all the time. That's okay. Those things that we do agree on, we can have a much greater effect on when we do come together. We have those open lines of communication, and we stay on a talking point that we can keep hammering in to our letters to the editor, to our discussions with our elected officials. Keep that mantra going. We can be effective. I know we do have a member of Caution that is running for state party chair, and if Jack would stop writing for a second, I think we're going to auction his t-shirt off as the popularity running in. But if you want to take just a couple seconds to talk about your run.
Thank you. Right now I am between, last weekend was the only weekend I've had off in 2 months. I was between county conventions, and now I'm headed into district conventions. I'll be going to district conventions, I believe it's 7, 8, 11, and 2, and 12 are the conventions that I'll be at. If anybody has any questions, a lot of the things that you've heard here tonight are the things that I'm trying to promote at the party level. I'm trying to get the grassroots to come up through North Carolina so that we can take back the party. I was, for those of you that aren't aware, I was a delegate to Tampa, Florida. I literally sat in the North Carolina seat in the delegates convention, looked at John Boehner behind the podium, looked at the teleprompter, and I saw the results of the vote. And I'm sorry, but constitutionally, that just pisses me off. That's why I'm